back on the Zero Hour. I am, as always, your host, Richard RJ Eskow. If you didn't think that the COVID-19 emergency was going to be used as an opportunity to declare war against Social Security, then you don't know Donald Trump or the Republican Party in this country. And here to talk about that now is a good friend of the program, Nancy Altman. Nancy is, as you probably know, president of Social Security Works. She is also the author of the forthcoming revised edition, or rather, I should say, co-author of the revised new edition of the book, Social Security Works for Everyone. And she joins us once again now. So first of all, Nancy, thanks for coming back on the program.
Thank you so much for having me. And Richard, if I could say that you were right, there is not just a war on Social Security, it's a war on seniors. And I think we'll be getting into that.
Yes, well, hopefully we will. So my first question was going to be, did I overstate the case? And clearly, I sense you do not feel that way.
Absolutely not. In fact, I would say the Social Security piece is part of a larger battle that involves a whole set of issues, and the COVID-19 is bringing them to light. So definitely, if anything, it's an understatement.
So let's talk about the war on Social Security, and then maybe pan out to, the broader war against seniors. And I want to do that, first of all, by setting the context for those that might not know or might not remember that back in 2016, one of the reasons Trump broke out of the pack of approximately 314 Republican candidates in the presidential primaries, was because he was the only one of, I think it was 14 or 15, to say that he wouldn't cut Social Security. So he very clearly distinguished himself from other Republicans in that regard, which makes it kind of, in my mind, a double betrayal now for him to go after Social Security. But how exactly is he doing that?
Well, let me again talk about that and talk about it in a little bit larger context. And that is that there's been a lot of fear mongering around Social Security and the economic collapse that we're suffering. And let me be very clear. Social Security is strong. It will continue to pay benefits in full and on time. But a number of opponents of Social Security, politicians, including Donald Trump, are using the pandemic and the economic crisis that we're in as a cover, as an excuse to try to cut Social Security. So Donald Trump, as you said, he understood the politics. And in running in 2016, he said, I'm not going to cut Social Security. And he'll say it again this year. But his statements before running for office made it clear. He talked about Social Security as a Ponzi scheme, which is, of course, is a scurrilous charge. He talked about thinking it should be privatized. We should raise the retirement age. It was obvious he was no friend of Social Security, but he did in 2011, I believe, go on Sean Hannity and say, the Republicans better be careful and not be too upfront about wanting to cut benefits or they'll lose. And he took that one to heart. But once he got into office, his budgets have consistently pushed cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, even though Congress has stopped him from making those cuts.
So, okay, well, that's a fair correction. And to me, that is also, I'm interested in your thoughts about that. What that says to me is that he's like every other Republican, which is he wants to get Social Security, probably for a combination of ideological reasons and to please, paymasters or whomever of the party, but wants to be deceptive about it because he knows that's not what the American people want. So instead, what I feel the standard play has been for many years has been to use every opportunity, having emptied the federal coffers for the program, the things you want to do. And we don't have to get into MMT or any of these theories about deficits. Having spent between Bush and Trump, the last two Republican presidents, I would say $5 trillion on tax breaks for the wealthy as a guess. They're now saying, sorry, folks, we can't afford Social Security anymore. We'd love to do it for you, but, we just don't have the money. You think I'm characterizing that correctly?
Yes. In fact, again, I think maybe even understating it. The Republicans have had their knives out, and they have talked about, they keep linking it to the deficit, even though, as we know, Social Security doesn't add a penny to the deficit. It has its own dedicated revenue source, and it's, as I say, has a $2.9 trillion surplus, which is why it can ride out the pandemic. But just like the proverbial defendant who is on trial for murdering his parents and pleads for mercy because he's an orphan, the Republicans do everything they can. It's a starve the beast to cut federal revenue and then say, oh my gosh, who would have thought that we can't, these programs are costing, we're running up deficits. It was obviously foreseeable, but even worse, what Donald Trump said, he made it a red line, although Mark Meadows now says it's not a red line, but he made it a red line to cut Social Security's dedicated revenue as part of the economic response to COVID-19. And that is so outrageous for so many reasons. First of all, as a form of relief or economic stimulus, people who are unemployed are not going to get anything from cutting the Social Security payroll contributions because they're not making them. People who are a quarter of federal and state and local government employees who are not covered by Social Security don't get it. It's not well targeted. The wealthier you are, the bigger the cut you get. It's slow. It's not giving people money right away. It's just a monthly small amount dribbled out. There are much better, more targeted ways. And yet Donald Trump said, nope, this is what we've got to do. And in fact, in a rare candid moment said, actually, it doesn't really have to do anything to do with the current economic crisis. I think we should just cut this money. So what you're doing is, it's a kind of starve the beast. You're trying to undermine Social Security by cutting its dedicated revenue.
So, and this to me, this is, and by the way, the Democrats in general and Barack Obama in particular are not absolutely pure on that question either, right? Because to me, this has always been a subtle point and a sneaky way of, I'm not certain Obama's was intended the way Trump's is, but I think to me, one of the things that is often done is they say, well, we need economic stimulus. So as economic stimulus, let's say people are going to have to pay the payroll tax that goes into Social Security for a while, which to me does a couple things. One, it, somewhat worsens, quote unquote, long-term balances for Social Security. And it frames those payroll taxes, which are minimal, really, for a lot of workers, as a burden they shouldn't have to bear, as something that's in their way. It creates a negative perception of them. So an administration like Trump's that didn't want to give, $1,200 to every American to help them get through the COVID crisis, and then maybe tax back from the wealthy or whatever. They don't care about the economy when stimulating the economy in that context, but they're more than happy to go after the relatively minuscule payroll tax contribution, which hurts Social Security and potentially hurts the public's feelings about Social Security. It also, and that is something that Obama did, although perhaps not for the same motivations. So I guess, are we talking about the same thing? And B, do you agree with my assessment?
I actually think it's worse than that. Let me review the history a little bit, and then say what I think the problem is. In fairness to President Obama, they came in the Great Recession. They had to do something. they came up with a proposal called, it was a make work pay tax credit that was very well targeted. It phased out at higher levels. It worked extremely well. That was when they had 60 votes in the Senate, and they were able to get that through. That that one expired, and they wanted to renew it. By the time they wanted, because the recession was dragging on, and by the time they wanted to renew it, they no longer had 60 votes in the Senate, and the Republicans behind closed doors said, "We don't like make work pay. We're not going to do that. We got to go with a payroll tax, what they called a payroll tax holiday." Now, the Obama administration went along with it, and it got voted into law. And so it's not that he's blameless, but this has been the agenda of the Republicans for a long time, and Obama conceded, gave into it, and all of us at the time really raised a hue and cry, but couldn't do anything to defeat it. But fortunately, it expired and was not renewed. I was sure it was going to be, but it wasn't.
So I guess, Nancy Altman, I just want to make 2 points. One is, rhetorically, from the Republicans, payroll tax holiday is even worse, because it's basically saying it's this horrible, oppressive thing that when you're not around it, it's like a holiday. That's number one. I mean, they know rhetorically what they're doing. But number two, I just want to point out that this is the third time you've said that I phrased something, I put it in too mild a fashion, which is not usually the criticism people make of me, that I'm too soft-spoken about these things. So I think this is a sort of historic conversation, and I just wanted to point that out.
Well, let me be precise about it, and that is that the economists of the world, who that never used to be this way, but have risen in the policy world, so that when you are debating health issues, you tend to talk to health economists more than you talk to doctors and nurses and hospital administrators. But the economists of the world see money as fungible, and they say, "Oh, okay, the government's a black box, money coming in, money coming out." I'm a lawyer, and it seems to me that there's a place also to think about legal requirements, legal responsibilities, and all of that. And it is not just fungible money coming in, money coming out, this kind of tax, that kind of tax. What Social Security, the payments are, they're premiums that we're paying for insurance. It's FICA stands for the Federal Insurance Contributions Act. It was put into law in the 1930s. They did not use political spin on their titles back then. The legislation to help give workers the right to unionize was called the National Labor Relations Act. It wasn't, Hooray for Workers Act or something. So
or some stupid acronym, which is what they like to do.
Exactly, Heroes Act or something. So it was, NLRA was the acronym.
Right, so, not glamorous.
So FICA, Federal Insurance Contributions Act, was what they were doing. It's not a tax, it's a premium. And what that means is, and it's dedicated, it cannot be used, you pay your income taxes, and Congress can use it for any purpose that the Constitution allows, any kind of spending they want, whether it's for wars or agriculture or the environment, whatever they want to do. This money, the money that comes in through these premiums, is dedicated, which means by law, it can only be used to pay Social Security benefits and to pay the associated administrative costs. That's why you can say that Social Security is running a shortfall. You don't say the Pentagon's running a shortfall, even though it spends a lot of money and there's a deficit in the general fund. But you can say that Social Security is running a shortfall because it has to balance its income and outgo. But that protects it also, because then when you run up huge deficits the way we are now, it's protected. It's not part of reconciliation. There are a lot of rules around Social Security. It cannot be just easily amended as part of a big deficit package. So that's what those who want to undo Social Security and get rid of it are always fighting against. They want to be able to get at it. They want to be able to go after it under a fast track process. And so they would love nothing more than to completely get rid of Social Security's dedicated revenue and have it all paid for out of general revenue. That's what the Republicans in the 1930s were advocating. But the genius of FDR and I think the value and the strength of Social Security is that it really embodies basic American values, the best of American values. And it's why Tea Partiers and conservatives like it as much as liberals do, because it's a very progressive, anti-poverty system, and yet it's got to balance its budget, and and everybody pays the same flat rate. So it's this ingenious combination, but the Republicans have from the beginning tried to undo that.
And again, we're talking with Nancy Altman, and Nancy is the president of Social Security Works and the co-author of the forthcoming new edition of the book, Social Security Works for Everyone. Now, there are those, as you know, who would push back on the notion that this is the right way to do it with a separate money flow, that it gives politicians a cudgel to say it's going broke and all of that. But I guess if I were, tell me what you think of this analogy, if this is right or wrong. If I were to create an analogy for what they're trying to do to Social Security based on the dedicated separate revenue stream, it would be as if I got on the bus to go to 96th Street from downtown, and I put my money in the little glass box, and if you still do that, I don't know. And about the bus driver says, "No, I got to take this money because I want to use it to buy gas, so I'm only going to take it to 72nd Street." It's like, no, I paid what the deal was. My money takes me to 96th Street. Is that an analogy for what's they're trying to do to Social Security?
I think that's an analogy. Let me give you another one, which isn't really an analogy. It's simply a private sector version of what this would look like, and that is, you work for some company that has a pension plan. By law, the employer has to set aside money in a trust fund. And if the employer goes out of business, he can't say, "Oh, sorry, we're taking all that money out. You're out of, you don't get your pension because we need that to pay our other creditors." No, it is segregated. It is separate. It would be as if you've worked for a company for 30 years, you're vested, you're about to retire, and just as you're about to do it, the employer says, "I've decided I'm going to renege on my promise because we need that money, or I want a bigger bonus this year." You go, "Wait, no, this money is dedicated to this one purpose. It's set aside. It's legally required to do that." That's the same thing. This is the people's pension. Instead of a private employer being the plan sponsor, it is the federal government that's the plan sponsor. It's the workers' money. It's all of so your bus analogy is right, but the even sharper analogy is, or a sharper understanding is, this is a pension plan, and we've all contributed to it. So it's even more conservatively financed than one where your employer puts in all the money, which is most private pension plans. This one, we've contributed half, our employers contributed half, the plan sponsor is the federal government, and now they're trying to just undo the contract.
So the bottom line then is, in my mind, that it makes no sense to vote for Trump or any Republican in November if you care about preserving Social Security, expanding Social Security. They're just not the people to turn to. Now, we could talk about, the Democrats too, but that one seems to me to be an open and shut case. The Republicans and Trump are out to get Social Security, and that's a good reason not to vote for them, in my point of view.
And again, I would state it even more sharply than you did, and that is that the breadcrumbs are there. It is absolutely clear what will happen if Donald Trump gets elected, and especially if the Senate remains in Republican control. They're setting it up. They are running a huge deficit. They're already starting to talk about, we've spent enough. We've got to start thinking about cutting. This is exactly what Mitch McConnell said before the 2018 election. After 2020, Trump will not be running again. And his agenda will be going after Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. I can guarantee you. And there will be nothing to stop. There'll be the Democrats that, let's hope they retain Congress, because if the government falls in Republican hands, so it's Trump and a Republican, not only Republican Senate, but Republican House, we are all going to have much weaker economic security.
And Nancy, I can predict the rhetoric now because it was used 12 years ago, and it's going to be, we've got to cut spending, and the largest budget items in the federal budget are Social Security and Medicare. That's where the money is. That's where we've got to go. And to which, the bank robber Willie Sutton said he robbed banks because that's where the money is too. So I can predict it happening. But you mentioned something earlier that that I'd like to go back to, which is you mentioned that Trump and his party are not, and I always say Trump and his party, because he tries to somehow say, I'm not like those other Republicans. Yes, you are. You're right with them, especially on this issue. So Trump and his party, as you said, we're not just waging a war on Social Security. I put it too mildly. They're actually waging a war on seniors overall. So what were you thinking there?
The people who are disproportionately affected by this worldwide pandemic, it's minorities, low-income people, people of color, but it's also older people and people with disabilities. Nursing homes have about half the deaths. I mean, this country, elsewhere in the world, if you look at Europe, which started out, had some problems at first, but have so-called bent the curve and they're restoring. Everywhere else, they protected their most vulnerable population. They protected everyone, but particularly their most vulnerable population. Here, and I think you're exactly right, except I would say that Trump has co-opted the Republican Party. There's no difference between Trump, but it's the Republican Party, which was, it's a marriage of convenience for sure. And you've got Trump saying, liberate Michigan and liberate all these countries. What he's really saying is go out and party and infect your grandparents.
Right.
You've got the lieutenant governor of Texas saying, hey, come on, there's some things more important. I'm old. There's some things more important than living. We can't destroy the economy. Well, I'd like to see him go and do some volunteer work in a hospital. He's not exposing himself to COVID-19 any more than Donald Trump is, but he wants the rest of us to expose ourselves. And that's what I mean for a war, because what they have done, their handling of COVID-19 is beyond incompetent. It's been deadly.
And, I know that they've been trying this sort of media campaign to pin it on, Democratic governors or anybody but themselves. And it seems to me there's no getting around the fact that, this is like a puzzle piece, like a jigsaw puzzle where you put it together and you have 50,000 dead seniors, basically. And the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle to me include Trump's incompetent handling of the pandemic response. It includes their refusal to give everybody health care so that people are giving diseases to one another. It's this phony rhetoric of liberate, which, I've been writing about too, which basically means, as if protecting one another was some sort of totalitarian act, or, that all of it fits together, the relative poverty of some people, the fact that nursing home workers are underpaid, the fact that they would lose their health insurance if Trump succeeds in getting the Affordable Care Act entirely overthrown. And I've been a critic of the Affordable Care Act, but it's certainly better than not an Affordable Care Act. So in a million different ways, it's hard. It's almost as if, we're living in an Ayn Rand nightmare where the mass death of people who aren't contributing to corporate bottom lines is something they're absolutely fine with and won't lift a finger or spend a penny to stop. And I just wonder how long the public, you may disagree, or you may think I'm not putting that strongly enough, but I wonder how long the public's going to put up with it.
Well, and actually, just as an aside, I can't resist saying, I don't know if you saw this, but the Ayn Rand Institute got one of those payment protection, PPP loans. I'm thinking, oh yeah, this is great anti-government stuff. You got your hand out.
And Ayn Rand herself, or Ayn, or however it's pronounced, spent her final days on Social Security.
Exactly.
Against government. I mean, they were all hypocrites and politics. But
to the point you're making, I think as this goes forward, I think the opinion polls are showing that who knows what's going to happen with foreign interference, but it does appear that people are not putting up with this. They understand it. They're catching on. But this is so far beyond incompetence. This is just, it's like negligent homicide. I mean, this is you can act so recklessly. The problem is Donald Trump is a day trader. He's just always looking for today's headline, and you cannot do that if you're a serious leader. You have to plan ahead, especially when there's a pandemic. The idea that we didn't instantly have masking, of nationwide masks, that we were not using the Defense Production Act to get PPE, and then we were immediately going to nursing homes, giving them the resources to make sure they could test everyone, to make sure that the essential employees were able to take sick leave, because we are, for a country that considers itself civilized, to not have paid sick leave. There are so many things that could only be done at the federal level. And absolutely, the Trump playbook is blame anybody but me. Blame China, blame the Democrats, blame the old people who are getting killed, blame someone, just don't blame me. But it's so obvious to see that we only have one president at a time, and his administration has been deadly to the most vulnerable among us.
I think that's unquestionably true, and I think they have ambitions to be even deadlier in the weeks and months to come. So I guess, none of us know the future, but I wonder to what extent Trump's party, the Republicans who are also up for re-election, might try to distance himself from this, because you've seen like Florida's governor going back and forth on the question of masking, Texas's governor going back and forth. I wonder if there just comes a point where he's just for survival, the Republicans pretend not to be Republicans between now and November.
They can try, but I don't think they can succeed. He really is a product of the Republican Party. I mean, you can go all the way back to Richard Nixon and the Southern Strategy, all of the racial injustice, really you can see the Republican Party more and more becoming the party of white supremacists. And you can see that they were only too happy to allow Donald Trump to become president because they thought it was the road to power. They didn't care about if he was a traitor to this country. They didn't care if he was corrupt. They just were going along. And now you're right. They're rats on a ship, and they may be trying to jump ship, but they're going to still be rats.
Well, I just keep thinking, the senior voters have been the backbone of Republican success for God knows how long, and which is why people like us have, tried to reach out to them. And I just wonder at what point seniors as well just start to say, this guy doesn't care about us. This party doesn't care about us. I think we probably ought to say goodbye.
Well, and let me add one optimistic note here, and that is that for much too long, through the 1990s and early 2000s, the Republicans and Democrats sounded indistinguishable on Social Security. They were different, but they've all both talked about bipartisan solution. We got to save the program. We got to fix the program, and we got to help people save, and all of this kind of stuff. And you couldn't really tell the difference between them. So you might as well vote on other issues. And there were other issues like Israel and other things that a number of older voters, would pick on some other issue. We now have a Democratic Party starting in 2016 that is full-throated for expanding, not cutting, Social Security. And we have a Republican Party. Joni Ernst is the poster child of this, who at a town hall meeting, when asked about Social Security, basically said, I can't tell you what I really think. We got to go behind closed doors and we'll come up with a package, after the election. It's like, wait, I thought that's what elections were supposed to be about. So in addition to waking up to the ways that the Trump administration has hurt them, I think that their seniors may, if Democrats are full-throated in their support for Social Security and Medicare, I think they can bring, it's sort of a push-pull, they can bring seniors to them as well.
Well, let's hope that's the case, and we will continue to be watching. As always, Nancy Altman, president of Social Security Works. As always, great to talk to you, and as always, thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you again so much for having me.
Our pleasure. And we will be right back after this. I am Richard RJ Eskow, and you are listening to The Zero Hour.